Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors, your source in the field for local outdoor news. This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, we're heading back after elk for the archery hunt. This year was a memory maker as we saw lots of bulls, had close calls, and filled a few tags. You may recall on a previous show that on the first trip out, my friend Jacob Newman arrowed a bull that we had to recover the following morning. Well, I didn't show you everything that happened that morning. It was pretty crazy, so let's finish the story. Alright, so as I said earlier, Jacob Newman arrowed a bull that we had to recover the next morning. As we were hiking in towards his elk, we spotted a distant bull in the same canyon. It was following a few cows and was actually right in the direction we were heading anyhow. So of course we didn't want to let an opportunity pass. It took a 45-minute or so hike up to the spot where we had seen them disappear into the trees, but as we got close, we slowed down and quietly positioned ourselves on the edge of those trees. The day before, we were held on, snowed on, and rained on for hours, and my camera got a little moisture behind the lens. It messed up the microphone as well and made the image a little blurry, but as we move on, you'll see it clears up. Well, positioned on the ridge, we tried calling to it, and sure enough, it bugled back, but from quite a ways off. It had covered quite a bit of ground since we last saw it, and was at least a quarter mile away, so immediately we started to cut the distance down. However, every time it bugled, it sounded like it was the same distance off. Apparently, it was moving just as fast as us. There were also bugles across the canyon, but those sounded like a hunter that we had ran into the night before. Well, nothing to do but get closer, so we kept moving forward as quickly as we could, trying not to go so fast that we accidentally bumped them. As we continued and it started looking more like the elk gave us the slip, I told Jacob to go ahead towards his elk and I would stay up a little higher just in case. I asked him to bugle every now and then to see if it would trigger the other bull to bugle back, thus letting me know where it was without me giving away my location. We continued like this several hundred yards. I was starting to think the elk had gone up over the ridge as I hadn't heard the bull in some time. Then as I was walking, the bull just walked out from behind a couple trees. It was only about 70 yards off and had no idea I was there. In fact, it just kept walking on a trail that brought it closer and closer to me. Well, as I drew back, the camera on my left hand tilted up, but right on cue, the elk stopped after I drew. It was standing broadside at just under 30 yards, so I picked a small spot to aim at and let an arrow fly.
I cannot believe that. Oh my gosh. The way that panned out. Holy cow. So Jacob's way below me, working up to his bull. We knew that this one, there was some action going on. And I was way above him. He was 100 yards below me in a clearing and he cow called suddenly. So I looked down and he's laying down. So I automatically get down and he's trying to tell me there was a bull above me or something. But and so I set up, nothing happened. Finally he waved me, he's like, "No, it went." And he was pointing up and over. So I came up and it's just wide open here above me. So I figured, oh, he's all the way over the top. Little did I know he was probably 70 yards away from me behind a tree right there, just behind those trees, and suddenly he just came walking out. Here I am standing up and he just comes walking. I probably saw him first at 60 yards, just like he didn't have a care in the world. And I got the camera on. You could see I got a little footage of him, but when I had to draw back I couldn't keep the camera on him. But he walked to what I figured to be, under 30 yards. And then he stood there broadside. I don't know if he kind of was looking at me or what, but he just stopped broadside. Let the arrow fly. Oh my gosh. And Jacob's bull should just be below me a couple hundred yards. That's crazy. So he ran off. I got a little footage of him. And then there were just tons of crashing and thrashing in the trees, which is usually a good sign. It usually means they go down fast. So I'm really confident with this one. Really confident. The arrow sunk in pretty good. It might have been a little bit forward, but pretty solid hit. And unless you've been here and you've done this, you have no idea. However, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Oh my, do we have work. We're probably 5 miles worth of hiking here. 2 elk. Can't even imagine.
Well, after a good half hour and letting Jacob know what happened, it was time to make sure it was down like I thought. Instead of following the blood trail from the shot, I went to the last spot I saw it run, and sure enough, there was blood. It went right into a jungle of downfalls, which explained all the loud crashing I heard. It was tough for me just to follow the blood trail because of all the down trees and such I had to climb over, but sure enough, there he was piled up.
Right there. Right where I heard all that ruckus going on. He's laying there. That's awesome. Let's go check him out.
Bull down! Yep. I yelled at Jacob to let him know my position as he was working up from the bottom, and then made it there myself. The elk had piled up against a log that we later found to be impossible to move him from. It would be staying right there when I boned him out.
Good shot.
All right, so here is my bull. Jacob was nice enough to walk up here and give me a hand with filming and stuff because his bull is down as well. And so we're heading there here very shortly. But anyways, it's just crazy. It happens more times than not where things, when you don't expect it, that's when something happens. Right, Jacob?
Absolutely. You're just sitting there having a conversation and things change.
Yep. So it's amazing. You talked about being lucky, and we talked about this yesterday. There's some luck, I guess, or blessings, whatever you want to call it. But the harder you work, the more of that you get. So it's definitely putting in the time, putting in the effort, and every now and then things just come together perfectly. So this is a great bull. He's beautiful. I am more than excited about this. I'm super happy about him, and just the way this panned out. So I'm glad Jacob's here to help me out a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't know that it'll be any help because he's going to pack his own out too. So we've got a ton of work ahead of us. We got more. I've got my kids. I've got friends. We've got some more hunts hopefully that we can get going here. But a fantastic start to the 2019 archery season for sure. Well, after going down and checking out Jacob's elk with him, I headed back up to mine, and we both boned out our elk on our own. All right, here we are. It is the next day because, of course, getting 2 elk out yesterday was not an option. We thought it was in the morning. We quickly learned that was not going to happen. So anyways, we made it back up here in the morning. We're both packed up with the rest of the meat and, of course, the antlers. So that's a pretty cool thing, I've got to say. Getting 2 elk that are literally on the same ridge. They died on the same ridge a few hundred yards apart from each other, and they were shot a day apart from each other. I don't know what the odds are of that, but that's pretty dang cool. I've never been able to pack 2 elk out like this at the same time. What do you think, Jacob?
Oh, I think I'm ready to be at the truck.
Well,
but that's pretty exciting. I've never experienced this before either. It was a lot of fun.
So in 3 to 4 hours, we hope to make it about a mile an hour, the pace we're going. And a lot of pain. But we will be back hopefully tomorrow with one of my kids and some friends, and we'll keep hunting. So fast forward to the next day. This time I was out with my daughter Abby and friend Troy. Hiking in 1.5 miles, we glassed up the hill and spotted an elk. It was still a bit off, but we could still tell it was a pretty nice bull.
All right, so that's a good sign. We've come into an area that we have never elk hunted before. Just trying new stuff out. And I've been here deer hunting and seen a lot of elk sign and wondered, And sure enough, we get here, look up the hill, and there's a bull, a few cows.
As we hiked in closer to see if we could get in on it, we did spot a few cow elk as well. That would make it a little harder to get in. We just used what cover we had and only moved when they weren't looking our way. Once within a few hundred yards, we were totally out of sight and could move a lot quicker. We had some trees picked out that if we could get there would get us to about 100 yards of the elk. From there, we'd probably try to call it in. Even before getting to our spot, we spotted the elk as it fed out into the open a little and then behind another tree. It was just too bad those cows were around that limited our movement. Then when it crossed back over, we could move once again. Again, the bull came back out. It was still at 150 yards, so all we could do was watch as it fed and made us wish we were a lot closer. It sure had long main beams. It was a very impressive 6-point bull that any of us would be happy to tag. 5 minutes later, when it went back into cover, we each made our last move to get into position. Troy went up to the right and Abby and I to the left. With both of us set up, we cow called to it, and sure enough, it answered. But that was it. A few more calls and a few answers later from it, and then it went pretty quiet. We thought they'd moved on, but then when we tried to make another move, it turned out they were still there and we bumped them out. So it was on to look for more elk. Well, the middle of the day was spent chasing ghosts and not really having much happen. But in the early evening, we spotted several elk from way across the canyon. We could see a couple bulls in and out of some trees, so we made a game plan and headed off. A mile later, we were sneaking into some rocks that we hoped would give us a view of the elk and possibly put us in range as well. Peeking over, sure enough, there were several cows feeding. No bull yet, but we knew there was one there somewhere nearby. Looking on the other side of the rock, we spotted a 5-point bull down below us. We thought we'd seen a 6-point earlier, so that was surprising, but we would be happy to take this bull either way. The hard part was figuring out how to get in range for a shot. It turned out that our high point was too high. We were over 100 yards off from both the cows and that 5-point bull. As we were trying to figure out a game plan, suddenly the 6-point we'd seen earlier showed up. Of course, this got us even more excited about the prospects of what was in front of us. However, we still had the same problem. What to do? How could we sneak into shooting range when it was so open between us and them? We watched for some time as the bull kept the cows in sight and even pushed a few straying ones back towards the others. It was fun to watch him from this vantage point as he raked sagebrush and bugled to show off his dominance to any nearby cows and bulls. Alright, so for the plan. Troy decided to head down, getting under the 5-point and sneaking up from below. That would give him the 5-point to possibly sneak in on, and if not, he could keep heading up towards the bigger bull. Abby and I went up above in case he bumped the elk. Maybe they would run towards us. Well, as each of us headed to our respective spots, the bull and the cows fed over the finger ridge they were on, and that totally changed the game plan. Now Abby and I hurried across the open sage while the elk were out of sight to close the gap. Troy saw us and also worked towards the elk from below. Once close, we carefully continued, assuming they could be anywhere. One slow step at a time, Abby and I moved forward until suddenly there were elk heads right in front of us. At first, all I saw were cows, but then the bull's antlers came into view. They were at 50 yards, but only heads and antlers visible. We were once again stuck, unable to move. It was just wide open sagebrush between them and us. The bull took a few steps, bringing it into better view, and stood over his presumed herd and let out a bugle. That's cool stuff right there. Then it turned and walked off. Why no shot? Well, Abby wasn't set to shoot at that distance, so all we could do was hope for another chance. As soon as they were out of sight, we moved forward once again. This time, when we found them, they were out over 100 yards off, and we still had no cover to move closer with. All we could do was watch that bull as it continued to display its dominance to the cows and work itself up. While we couldn't get a shot off from here, at least we could enjoy the show he was putting on for us. Suddenly it got very interested in something below us. It turned out it had spotted Troy and didn't know what he was. Troy had froze and the bull actually moved forward a good 20 yards and then more. It got to within 70 yards of us, and maybe it would come even closer. One thing was for sure, it had its eye on Troy, but just didn't know what he was. Eventually, after quite a long standoff, the wind must have shifted and gave him a smell of Troy, who was only 60 yards off himself, because the bull suddenly turned on a dime and took off, taking his cows with him.
That was frustrating.
That was pretty cool though.
Heart racing.
That was really fun though to watch that bull. So Abby, first really close experience. What do you think?
Heart racing. But it was cool. I liked it.
That was fun. We got to watch it bugle, we got to watch it rake, all right in front of us, just hoping for an opportunity. So didn't pan out quite how we wanted, but it was still a great way to end the day. Tune in next week at the same time for another episode of Jared Scott Outdoors.